We've given some thought to consumer demand, how consumers behave. We've given some thought to suppliers' costs of production. So we're now in a position to begin to examine how market prices are set. And we'll see that the way in which market prices are determined is dependent upon the market structure within which firms operate. We wouldn't expect prices in an agricultural market where there are large numbers of small firms to set prices in the same way that prices are set in an industry where there are just, say, a few very large firms. We'll look at 4 market structures. The first market structure, a very important one, is perfect competition. This is a market structure where there are large numbers of firms, all of them small relative to the size of the total market. And it's a market where it's relatively easy for new firms to join or leave the industry. At least it is in the long run. Remember, in the short run, the level of capital can't be altered. And perfect competition is a market where all firms produce the same product. It's a homogeneous product. It's undifferentiated. When economists are looking around for examples of perfect competition, they often choose agriculture. It's not difficult to understand why. Perfect competition requires large numbers of producers. And in many countries, that's exactly what you get in the farming community. But it also requires an identical product. One farmer's onions very much like another farmer's onions. So as a result, you've got a situation in which you've got a large number of producers producing an identical product, and therefore no individual producer, no individual farmer has control over the market price. The price is set by the interaction of supply and demand. Actually, what we find is that in some societies, agriculture is becoming less and less a good example because units are getting bigger and bigger and agribusiness dominates the market. But here in Poland, we've got a very good example of perfect competition because we have large numbers of still very small producers. And we're going to see shortly that one of the implications of this kind of market is that the firm has no control over price. I'm interested in how the prices get set. Who decides how much they get paid?
It's not the settled price. Someone that buys basically tells the price.
Does it vary very much?
And they say from week to week there are really huge actually difference in the prices.
Do you know why these prices vary so much from week to week?
Right now there's quite alright price because it's 4.50 per kilogram. The world price is like 3.50 when it's really, really low. So the difference is quite big. It's from 3.50 to right now it's 4.50.
That's a big difference. Prices are determined by supply and demand. The producer has to accept the price that the market gives and simply make a decision about how much output to produce. Then we'll be looking at a market structure that we call monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition is the kind of market structure where you have a fairly large number of firms producing a somewhat differentiated product, therefore different prices, and also relatively easy entry and exit into and from the industry. The High Street provides some good examples of this kind of market structure. Bakers, chemists, etc., where there's a large number of stores all selling pretty much the same commodity, but where they try to differentiate the product in order to retain some control over price. The key difference is in the nature of the product. We're going to have a number of firms, freedom of entry into the industry being easy, but it's a market where each firm is able to make its product a little bit different from others. So we might think about restaurants. There are many restaurants in town. They all sell pretty much the same thing, food, but the decor is different, the chef is different, the menu is different. So each firm can differentiate its product even though it operates in a market where there are many firms and it's easy for new entries to come in. And that means that the firm will have some control over its price. If you're in a restaurant and you raise your price a bit, you're going to lose some of your custom. But some people will particularly like your restaurant, particularly like the decor, particularly like the food, and so demand for your product won't disappear entirely. But you will tend to have a relatively elastic demand. Having thought about that kind of market structure, we'll then look at a very different market, that which we call oligopoly. Oligopoly is a market which will be dominated by just a few large producers. And in these markets, entry into the market is restricted in various ways. It's difficult for new firms to join the market. Generally speaking, the product will be differentiated in some way. There are many markets of which we can think here. Cars, a few large producers selling a differentiated product, but it's difficult for new car firms to enter the market. Petroleum, banks, pharmaceuticals, airlines, many examples of oligopoly. These firms will face a downward sloping demand curve with a relatively inelastic demand in many cases, because the nature of the product can be really quite differentiated. A Rolls-Royce car is very different from a Ford. And finally, we'll look at the fourth and last structure that we're going to be interested in, monopoly. Monopoly is where there is just one firm, mono, Greek, one. Usually in this kind of market, there are very high barriers to the entry of new firms. It's very difficult for another firm to be able to compete with the existing monopolist. So of course the nature of the product is unique. Now, there aren't many markets where there is no competition, but there's an element of monopoly in lots of industries. For example, the Øresund Bridge between Denmark and Sweden is a monopoly. If you want to drive your car, you'll have to pay the monopolist for the privilege. Some train companies have monopolies. Local water utilities are monopolies. There are no close substitutes for water. Some electricity utilities are monopolies. And this means that the firm faces a downward sloping demand curve, often relatively inelastic. The monopolist has considerable control over the price.